Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. And if you're here from Gumroad, that means you probably already know all about my custom Procreate brushes for concept art. And if you're here from YouTube, I'll put links down in the description so you can get to my Gumroad, where I've put my custom concept art brushes for Procreate that you can download there. And this video is for me to explain to you how those brushes work. And over here you can see a piece of art that I've made with it, mostly using these brushes. I mean, you can do it from start to finish using them, but I would suggest still doing everything by hand and then adding a bit of special touches here and there, if I could call it that, just to make the picture look more complete. For example, maybe a bit of cloud or mountains in the distance, or a little bit of trees that is not part of the main focus of the picture. So like, it's not worth your time to hand draw it. You just want it to be there as fast as possible. So you can use these brushes for that purpose. Here I'm starting with a background that is not white. I think I'd like to try going for a darker color. Okay, like this one. Oh, where is it? Here it is. Concept art 1. So starting off, there are 3 brushes here. They pretty much behave the same. They are all brushes you can use to draw things by hand. Starting off with this one, it's called Hard Rectangular. It's pretty much like the round brush, but instead of rounded in shape, it's rectangular. And I actually don't like the round brush much, because I don't know, something about it that I just don't like, how it makes everything look rounded. Because round brushes won't be able to make sharp angles like that, but rectangular brushes can. And rectangular brushes can still make curved edges like this. So I prefer rectangular ones. I think it's superior. Okay, and the second one is the same thing pretty much. And the opacity here is set to about halfway. If you set it to full, so it draws, and if you use only a light touch, it will blend. But that's looking kind of harsh, so I like to put it down about 50%, so it blends more smoothly, more gently. Although if you add a little pressure, it still lays down a nice opaque color. After that comes hard blend, flat dry. So at opacity at about here, that's 38. If you give it a light touch, you'll get this nice texturing effect that you can use for rough surfaces like maybe a wall or stone or brick. And if you raise it all the way to 100%, it looks pretty much solid and not as textured. And if you give it a light touch, it blends like so. I like to keep it down at 36 though, so I get that nice texturing effect. Now moving on to rounded hills. Go ahead and clear that. Rounded hills, these brushes, there's a lot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Lots of brushes. These brushes pretty much, they all behave the same. So I'm just gonna show it to you instead of telling you about it. This is what rounded hills look like. You can tap again, or you can just drag and press harder to get bigger ones. Rounded hills double, pretty much same one, but you know, you get more hills. Like so. Pointy hills. Let's put that behind this one. Tap. Drag. Tap. A bit much. There. Pointy hills number 2. Oof, that's big. You know what? I think we can blend the bottom part so it looks like there's lots of smoke in the back, or it's sort of hidden in mist. Okay, erase the part down below. Sand dunes. What sand dunes actually are, I like to do it on linear dodge layers. Although I think I'll explain sand dunes later. So let's move it down. All the way here. Okay. I believe we were here, so I'm gonna go back to rocky hills. Turn that into a normal layer. Okay. Tap, 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 tap. That's what it looks like. You can make it bigger. See, you've just made something that looks like a mountain range. I'll give you another example down here that I won't keep. Tap once. If you'd like to make it look more varied, you can keep on tapping. You know, mix it up. I'm doing this with a light touch. That's why you're seeing it look transparent. But if you tap harder, you'll get opaque like this. Like this, pretty much. You can. That's a good background as it is already. But I'm gonna go ahead and try to do even more than that. Okay, let's change the color, something cooler. Where's blue? Something like this, not so saturated. And it's gotta be bright. Okay, that's good. This color. Moving on to low hills. Okay, I think I'll add it in the front this time. Should be darker. No, it's too saturated. Okay, I'm tapping. Tap again. I'm gonna drag a bit. Tap, tap, tap. Common hills. Okay. Low and common hills. So it's a mix of low and common combined into one. Although that's me tapping, but you can also just drag. I think for this one I'm gonna make it darker. Tap Maybe here. Yeah, okay. Common hills with foliage. It's like common hills, just like this. Oh, hang on. Okay, this is what it looks like, right? But common hills with foliage, it looks like it's got foliage on it. See that? Like if you'd like to draw a bunch of hills or little mountains and they've got touches of foliage, you can use this one. Okay, common and pointy hills. Just me dragging. Give it a tap. Another one. Another. It's got a jitter, as you can see. Sometimes you get dark, sometimes you get light. Blur this one out. Not everything needs to look sharp. Okay, this one too. There. Small mountain. Let's add it in the back using this color. There. You know what? Yeah, you know what? That's good over there. And let's erase it a bit, because I don't want it overlapping with this mountain on the left. Okay. Like that. And add, I call this one a Chinese mountain, because it looks like one, but the Chinese mountain brush, it looks very specific. It looks like this. So it's good not to use this too much. For one picture, I like to use it only once or twice. So let me show you how you should use this. You could go quite dark. Tap it like that, and then reduce the opacity. Maybe bigger, like this. Okay, and erase the bottom part. Okay, so that's it for mountains. And now we got cliff impressions. Okay, so I'm gonna try to demonstrate this all the way down here. So where is it? Rocky Hills. Okay, so let's use this color. This is on a new layer. So imagine you got like a mountain range and it's looking too simple, so you'd like to add some texture. And a thing I like to do is add the #1 cliff impressions and the cliff impressions #2. So for example, this is a new layer on top and I've clipped it to the one below. We can set this to multiply and just make a bunch of taps using this one too. That's too big. Okay. Now reduce the opacity and you can blur some of it. Because when things are in a distance, not everything is of the same sharpness. That's how it's supposed to be. Or another thing you could do is also to increase the opacity, but then you erase out bits of it. For example, like this. So you get some that are darker than the rest. And now that looks like a quite convincing mountain range out in the distance. There. So that's one way to use it. Go ahead and delete. Moving on to rolling hills, I like to add this in the very front of the picture, in the foreground. So I tend to go quite dark with it. So this is how it behaves. It's got a jitter, so sometimes you get light, sometimes you get dark. But if you press harder, you get big marks. So what I like to do is I start with a light touch somewhere here, and then I make a quite strong stroke leading below, like this. Let's do that again. Tap, tap. Now this makes it look like as if there is a stretch of ground in the foreground. Like this is imagine there's a person standing right here. It's as if this is a cliff of some sorts and you're looking out into the landscape. And this part here you can just remove because it's jutting out. Cut. Okay. Alpha lock. Blend. You see these parts over here? If it looks kind of funny, you can always blend. Like that. Over here as well. Okay, and the other one, Rolling Hills number 2, pretty much the same, but it looks more rounded than Rolling Hills number 1. So, like this. Let's add a little one over here. Okay. And alpha lock. And if we just use an ordinary soft brush to add some atmosphere to this one, it sort of separates that one from this one right here. We can do that too with this one. There. Going back. Rectangles and flats, and rectangles and flats. So I like to use this one to add some texture to the ground. So let's first add the ground until about there. Okay. Take that color, make it darker. Okay, here we go. Make another layer on top, clip below. I'm gonna use rectangles and flats. Patches of land 1 and 2 also work the same. So here goes. Hang on. Okay. That's not dark enough. Okay. Like this. And then I like to transform and distort. And I just drag it out like this. So it really gives you that perspective. And set this to multiply. Reduce the opacity. And I'll do another one on top. Multiply again. Using the other patches of land brush. And this one you don't really have to distort. So if you press slightly, you get little marks, but you can also press harder to get big ones. So you can just do it lightly for things in the distance, and then as you get closer to the foreground, you can just press harder, like that. Okay, let's do that again. Okay, another one that's supposed to be massive over here. Okay, that's good. Reduce the opacity. Okay, and now comes oh, this one. This one's a similar to the one above. Slightly different shape. See that? Like this. Sort of makes it look like sand dunes. So pretty much randomized horizontal strips. And for sand dunes, I like to do it on a linear dodge layer or a color dodge. Okay, here it goes. So it's like little bits of like the tops of sand dunes that are catching light. Okay, that's quite intense. So just erase. Does not need to be that intense because it catches your eye too much. Next comes ground glow. See how that works on the linear dodge layer. It's as if there's a patch of dust that's being caught in the wind and it's also catching light. So just let's add one for now. Maybe over. I wonder where's good. Oh, here. No. Okay, 2 of it. Right there. And then delete it a bit. Erase, because that's too much. Another moss brush. It looks like just, you could use it for grass, but it does look more like moss. So if you've got a rock and you'd like to add a bit of moss around the edges, this is a good brush to do that. And you can also use a linear dodge layer to let it catch a bit of light around the top. See that? Okay. Moving on to scarce tall grass. Let's add it to the ground. I would say a good spot would be over here. That's a bit too close to the foreground now. There. Flowers, you can go light with it, maybe nearly white. Sort of suggests that it's growing on the grass. Okay. You can do it above as well. On a layer on top of everything. Ground floor. Let's add it to the foreground once more. Let's use a greenish color for this. Over here as well. Desert grass. The good thing about desert grass is if you use a smaller size, you get something that does resemble desert grass, but you can also tap harder to get big ones like that, which can get useful. A good trick I like to do is on top of everything. So with something like the desert grass brush, you can just make it quite dark now and blur it. Gaussian blur. So even though it's in the foreground, you're not really looking at it because it's blurry. You're looking at things that are further away, almost like a frame. Dry stems behaves the same way. Like that. Although you can also add it up here. So almost as if it's part of a tree that's being cut off. Scarce reeds. Add bits of it here and there. And for tall pine, what I like to do is I make a selection. Freehand this. Okay. Like this. It's a bit small. Okay. Let's use this color. And do another one with the wide pine brush. Okay. Let's put that down here. When you make it in selections like that, it gives it, it's almost as if it helps indicate perspective. Because there are layers of it. A little bit over here, and there's more in the distance. Let's make one smaller. Here. Using the other one too. There. Tree crown, number 1 and number 2. So you can use this to make a bunch of leaves. So I'll give an example on top of here. So you can just do that and then add a branch going down on the bottom part of it, and it will look like a tree. So you can either tap once, twice, or you can just keep on doing that and get a tree. But my favorite one is actually number 2. Tree crown number 2. So if you press lightly, you get exactly the same color that you've chosen here. But if you press harder, you get it darker. Which is very nice because it makes drawing trees much easier. An example would be like if I were to make light taps like this, I can tap harder to get dark, light tap again, and more dark. And if you keep on doing this, you'll end up with something that very much resembles a tree. Okay, make smaller ones too. Okay. Now imagine if there are branches sticking out from the bottom part of it. Or a tree trunk. That looks quite convincing already. Okay. So you can actually move that somewhere down here. Over here. No. There? I think it was here before. Okay, but let's erase out the bottom part, because it's sort of cutting into the picture. Okay. Now, the next one's going to be, where is it? Tree and leaf eraser, which is to erase bits of a tree. So I'll show you how it works. You can make little taps like this. Keep on doing it until it looks good. Or you can just drag your Apple Pencil. So it sort of brings out the background. Like there are holes in the tree where light shines through. Tree crown elliptical. This sort of works very much like the pine trees. It's good for trees that are in the distance. Okay, like so. Okay. Okay, trees number 1. I like to add this one, usually as a final touch. And I like to add it quite dark. So, examples would be, let's say, on this one. I know it's quite hard to tell because it looks chaotic, but I've used it here about twice only. And I'll do it for you here. So I tap once, maybe twice. That's a bit too close. There. Okay. And then I blur it out. Oh, you know what? I think I'll keep one sharp looking and another one sort of down here. But let's have this one blurred. Okay. Next comes leaves number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6. Okay, so they all pretty much behave the same. Although I would recommend not using more than one of these for a single tree, because a tree that has many different kinds of leaves is just weird. So let's add it for an example here. Okay. And I'll do it again with a different one. Leave number 3. So you can either tap, 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 or you can also drag. It looks good. So now I'll skip over to, okay, this one's sort of unique. You know how there are those trees out in the desert where the leaves are pretty much just thorns? Like they look like cactuses. So the way I use this one is I make a circular pattern and it looks like a cactus, a sea urchin almost. So if I rotate to the left anti-clockwise, I'll end up with a ball. But if I start to rotate the other way, which is clockwise, I'll get these thorns. So if you do it that way, you'll get like a little ball with little thorns. But if you start rotating it clockwise from the start, you will get these longer looking thorns. So it's quite useful. Background foliage. Now this one is usually for a more foresty looking area. I'll do it up here. Imagine you're out in the forest and you're looking up from the ground, and this is what you should be. This is what you should see. That's not quite dark enough. And you know what? I'll make it look blue. And the trees will be a dark green. Like this. This is what you should see. So I like to use that for backgrounds. Like if you're drawing, let's say, a village of some sorts, and you can add this instead of clouds to make it seem like they're in some humongous forest. Okay, fill in the rest with this. That could be too much, right? So we could erase once more using the tree and leaf eraser. Maybe some bigger patches. Now imagine you've got these branches. That's strewn across all over the place. Now that looks like proper background foliage. I'll do it again using the other one, because they're pretty much the same, but they slightly different shape. I believe number 2 should have more chaotic looking leaves. Let's compare. See? Number 2 looks more chaotic. Okay, just bear with me. Make a rectangular selection, so I won't have to do it for the whole canvas. Okay, so let's turn the rest darker. Okay, invert. Now alpha lock. Okay, imagine some darker patches of leaves. Oh, you know what? I think I'll go lighter over here. Some areas. But then I'll also go dark. Try not to get it everywhere. Okay. Go back to this color. There. Now you can imagine there are branches sticking up. Oh, alpha lock is turned on, huh? Okay. Oops. Bigger ones too. Even bigger. Makes it really seem like you're looking up towards the canopy when you're in a forest. There. You know, a little bird would look cool too. Couple of birds. Like that. Moving on to the next brush. The next one is the bush brush. So, going back to this one, you can add a bush that easy. You could also alpha lock and go darker, or go lighter first, and then go darker and darker for the ones below. You can even go back lighter again. Looks like a bush. Let's move that here. Here. Yeah, over there. blurred a bit. Okay. Distant patch of trees. So again, like the tall and wide pine trees and the elliptical trees, this is just to indicate a bunch of trees that are in the distance that are just so small they pretty much look like little spots. Like that. Distant bouquet, rooftops and walls. These trees can be used to indicate a civilization of some sorts out in the distance. So how I like to use it is like this. What am I using right now? Oh, distant walls. Okay, sorry, it should be this one. See that? That's good for, let's say you're out in the desert and you're looking off into the horizon and you see a little lake or an oasis, or maybe you're at the beach, you're on the sand and you're looking towards the ocean, or even someone's skin when you're looking at it from really up close. You can see this effect. Like, have you ever seen someone so sweaty or so oiled up and their skin just catches the sunlight, and you'll see this. But in this case, because it's a landscape, it can sort of suggest that there's something shiny out in the distance. Could be a lake, like an oasis, or just sparkly sand, or it could be lights coming from a little village. So you could make that blurry and then add more on top that is not blurry. Same way you can add rooftops. It sort of indicates that there might be a village off in the distance, and below you can go with a darker color to indicate walls to go with the rooftops. See? Almost like a little town. Random circles are good for when you've got things that splash around, like blood or water, like from a little stream or a waterfall. So pretty much this is what it does. Good for things like that. Spatter. Spatter is good for, let's say you're painting a bit of blood on the surface, like this one. I used, for these spatters, I pretty much just chose the color dark red, and I made little taps here and there, and I end up with spatters like that. Specks of dust. This scene looks like a desert scene, right? So I like to add on a linear dodge layer sort of all over the place, like this. Really makes it look like there's lots of dust in the wind, because otherwise it would just look too clean. Ducks and birds. So you can add towards the end, when you're nearly done with your picture, You can add darks like this. The darks could be pure white, or it could be dark like that. A good trick to do is have a mix of both. Like this. And if you apply motion blur, it will look like they are in motion. And it's cool if you have more that are not blurred. So it's like your eye is catching only bits of them, and the ones that your eye is not picking up, they're all blurry. And if you've noticed, they're all facing the left. So what I like to do is, if I'd like to make them face right, I simply transform and I flip horizontal. And I can move them around like that. Okay, clear this. Birds. These are all pretty much the same, including insects. So you can have, you can try experimenting with these. Should be a lot of fun. Like that. More birds. Looks very chaotic. It's just too many birds. It's like birdland. Insects I like to add for nighttime scenes. Like this one. So you see around the campfire, there are these insects that I've painted in using a light color, so it looks like they're being burned up by the fire, or the light from the fire is cast onto them and they look super bright. Because usually for nighttime scenes, when there's fire and when there's a light source of some kind, it really makes it convincing when it's surrounded by bugs. Because when you're outdoors, bugs just go towards the light. Okay, let's continue. Okay, for rain. There are three versions: the normal one, the blurry one, and mixed, which is a mix of both. The blurry kind of rain and the normal kind of rain. See? And this one is rain number 2. And ripples. Ripples are good for, I'll give a very, very quick example. So if you make a selection, so imagine that's a, okay here, imagine that's a river, and you've got darker colors, hang on, alpha lock, darker colors, and you've got mid-tone and light colors. And you just apply motion blur. Just imagine that this is a river that is very calm. No ripples yet. Okay. Let's add that to the one above. Motion blur again. So, adding on a linear dodge layer. You know what, let's not clip that yet. Let's add ripples all over the place. And then we can now clip it and then transform. And distort. Do you see that now? To give it a bit of perspective. And now we transform again. Distort. There. So moving on to clouds. The way clouds work, clouds number 1 and number 2, it works pretty much like the tree brushes. Hang on. Like this one. So if you were to press, I'll do it on a new layer. Light blue sky. Let's have gray clouds. Clouds number 1 and number 2 are pretty much the same, but the shapes are slightly different. So pressing lightly, you'll get lighter colors. And if you press harder, you get darker colors. So you can keep doing that. And remember, as it applies for everything in this world, the closer they are, the bigger they get. So make sure to add big ones too. Like this, okay? Little ones again, down here. So now you can play around with the color curves to make the darks really dark. And then saturation all the way down. And now you can play with gradient maps just to pick a color you like for the clouds. And if we go with that, I can duplicate this, turn that into multiply. No, not multiply, let's go with overlay. Another one set to linear dodge, another one set to linear dodge. But the difference is this one's going to be blurred. And the other one will simply be reduced in opacity. So I did that in about, 1 minute. And if you just try to play around with this, you can make something as complex looking as this, which I pretty much did in about 15 minutes. I think the time lapse is super short. How long did this take? This took me, the time lapse itself is like 23 seconds, so this took me super fast. In no time at all, I finished. I really think I finished in about 15 minutes. I did it pretty much the same exact way I showed you just now. Going back here. And clouds number 3, going down all the way to number 8. Delete. Let's go with a white. I'll just go over these fairly quick because I think you can just explore and experiment yourself. Okay, that's what it looks like. And number 3, blurry and mix is pretty much the same, but of course one's blurry, and mixed one is a mix of normal and blurry. So I'll go with number 4 now, which is quite similar to number 3. Maybe you've got a bit little clouds like that. And then you've got cloud number 5. There. You go outside at 10 o'clock in the morning, you look up, this is what you'll see. Clouds number 6, clear this. Now this is looking too sharp at the bottom. So what I like to do is after I apply that, I take the smudge tool and I just blur out the bottom bits. Like this. Okay, and that's only for number 6. For number 7, you know, more clouds. Tap once, tap again. Get big ones. Clouds number 8. See what you can get with simply using white colored clouds on top of a green background. Now figure number 1. You know, so in a lot of concept art, you usually see like a figure, usually a person with a stick or a sword or a spear, and it's only put in the picture as a means to provide scale, because the person is usually small and they're in the foreground, and because they're small, it really emphasizes that everything else that you're looking at in the picture is actually very, very big. So I've made it myself, so you don't have to. And it looks like, right here, so it looks like a satyr creature, like a satyr girl with horns, and she's holding a scythe. She's got a tail and a stick. So let's add her here. Okay, but right there. And now I've got the moon brush, which is not really a moon. It's the sun that I took on a rainy day and therefore looks like a moon. It's added on a normal layer, a linear dodge layer. Give a little tap. That's what you get. And these builder brushes. Okay, so for the builder brushes, what they are is, what you can use them for is actually for texturing, but another good thing that you can use them for is for coming up with impressions. Sort of like an exercise for your eyes. So if you don't really know what you want to draw, you can sort of do that. And now this looks somewhat like a tree trunk. Although it could be like a big skyscraper with lots of billboards on it. Let me just work on it a little more. Okay. Alpha lock this. Go for a lighter color. And then so we can try again. Let's try smaller this time. See what we end up with. Okay, so for me, well, at least for me, what I see here is, this is like a tree. This part is like a tree. Right here is the opening. like, let's say this is a tree and there's an opening where you can just walk inside, like that. And over here are pathways, and this one is like a little road that you can take. So this is what came out, and this is what I see. So I sort of just use it for something like that. I'll give you a good example of what I've used it for right here. So do you see the roof? It's supposed to be made of hay, like dried grass. And there's lots of textures, right, on the roof. I didn't actually draw all that by hand. I used Build a Brush number 3. And for this one, I believe I used the Build a Brush I showed you just now. And for this pink looking tree in the back, there are some white spots on it. And I used Build a Brush number 3, which is this one down here. Clear this, which is this. Okay, so let's say you've got, okay, hang on. Let me just clear this again. So let's say you've got a roof of some kind of this color, and I can go ahead up here, apply on a clipping mask layer, a texture. That's looking a bit too saturated, so let's darken it. Too bright. And distort, just so it matches the direction of this roof. Okay, turn down the opacity. Now there you go, like you've got a textured roof. Another thing you can do is, down here I've got another builder brush called Roof Tiles. Okay, so, oh, you know what, let's apply a normal layer. So let's put that up here. Just distort once more. Okay, so that's what we have ended up with. Make a duplicate of this, and the one below, turn that into multiply. And I'm gonna just move it by several pixels down and to the left. Okay, just to give it some shadow. So now you have a roof with tiling on it. So as you can see, there's quite a lot. There's Build a Brush 1 all the way to number 13. And for some of them, I've given names like water, bricks, poles, city, domes, and towers. Not for any other specific reason aside from that's just what they sort of look like if you just use it to paint. But the purpose of these builder brushes is sort of just for a visual exercise. So if you can come up with a bunch of chaos and make sense of it afterwards, when you've got, let's say you went into an art block and you don't really know what to draw next, you can just play around with the builder brushes, okay, and come up with something new. Okay, I'll show you what I mean by how they sort of look like towers. these, okay? They look like towers, right? In the city from a distance, and this one looks like domes. And this one, poles. And this one straight up looks like a city. So, I mean, if you're drawing something like a piece of landscape and you'd like to have like a little city somewhere in the distance, you can use this to just put like a little city there in the distance. Like, you don't really want to hand draw everything because you can't really go that small. Like, it's just not possible to draw something like this if it's that small. So you can just resort to using these instead to give the impression of a city. And you can maybe fix it up by erasing it a bit on the bottom. See that? It looks better already. Rectangular. Oops. For the city itself, let's go with an airbrushed look. Copy this. Linear dodge. Move that below. Blur this out. And you know what? Add another layer beneath. Like this. And then we can blur this. Oops. Is it a linear dodge? It is. Oh, it's because it's alpha locked. Okay, hang on. Okay, now we're using the airbrush again to erase on the bottom. Well, okay, anyway. That should cover everything. From the top all the way to the bottom. If you've purchased this, thank you very much. I hope it would be of great use to you. Again, I do recommend that you don't use this to make a full drawing from start to finish, although you can, because I've made okay, where do I have any? I've made some drawings like this one, pretty much 95% made using the brushes I just showed you. So it is possible, but if you make another picture using the using the exact same brush set, then it will look similar to this one. Like, there's a recipe to it. So I do still recommend you draw everything by hand, and if you'd like to add some finishing touches here and there, like maybe you'd like to have so let's say you've made this by hand, and then you'd like to just add a bunch of birds in the distance. Maybe add some texture to your wood over here. Then you can go ahead and do that. Or maybe you'd like to add a moon. Although I simply did like a little tap with a round brush twice to make these two moons. But if you like to use the moon brush, you can do that too. So I do recommend you draw everything by hand, because that way it will look more organic and not look like it's following a recipe. Okay, so once more, if you'd like to check this one out, this brush set for Procreate, I'll provide a link down below in the description. And thank you very much for watching. See you next time.